Good afternoon to you. 306 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Marc Lotter is with us, former Trump campaign official. We will chat with him about what happened last night at that big debate between the vice presidential candidates. Luke Rosiak is here at 4:30 from the Daily Wire. We'll get into another local school scandal in Virginia. And then Sean Carney joins us at 5 o'clock. President and CEO of 40 Days for Life, as Tim Walz and the CBS moderators lie like crazy about the state of abortion in the country. Sean will address those lies coming up. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Hey, Tim Walz, how did you prepare for the debate last night?
I've become friends with school shooters.
Wow, that's a novel strategy. Not everyone does that. That explains the crazy eyes. He spent the whole debate with his eyes bugging out. You see, Politico is already mounting a defense of his crazy eyes. I kid you not. They consulted a body language expert today in order to find out what they thought of the debate. And Politico is praising Tim Walz's eye popping last night. So the comparisons I'm seeing for JD Vance are that everybody thinks he looks like Jim Halpert from The Office. He would break the fourth wall and give these like glances at the camera, like, yeah, you and I, we know what's going on here. There's a lot of that going on. Meanwhile, Tim Walz, he was a deer in the headlights. His eyes were wide open, like he was shocked he was on that stage. He was shocked that he had to discuss anything with anyone. He was shocked that he had to call upon his memory to answer questions. He was shocked that anybody had pointed out that he has a history of lying. He just was shocked the whole time. It was just eyes wide open, cartoon character shock all night long for Tim Walz. And Politico today says this about Tim Walz and his eyes. They say that Walz's wide eyes show his passion. They show his passion. When Walz, this is Politico, when Walz felt especially passionate about something, he'd open his eyes wide as saucers. Eye popping can sometimes be a sign of surprise, but for Walz, it simply revealed his emotional intensity, like this moment during an exchange about abortion, they say. Ready? Here we go. The orbicularis oculi muscle, working in concert with the corrugator and frontalis muscles, contract to raise the eyebrows, a dynamic and emphatic facial motion that grabbed the viewer's attention. Early humans would have made such facial gestures to communicate strong emotions like danger is close. For Walz, it gave extra weight to his feelings and held our gaze. Is this not the most North Korean thing you've read all day? Like he's Kim Jong-un. Oh, his eyes were wide. It was demonstrating his intensity. He was drawing us to him. He was accentuating his feelings and holding our gaze, using his frontalis muscles and his corrugator and his orbicularis oculi muscle. What a ridiculous assessment. That's what was going on. I like how they offer that, sometimes people think it means danger is close, but in this time, it means that Walz is in total command of this stage. They also assessed JD Vance last night. They made some references to the fact that he had a beard. It's not even body language at that point. It's just he's got a beard on his face, which is really funny. JD Vance's beard, and they wrote that his beard does matter. This is the body language expert concluded that JD Vance's beard mattered. And they say our appearance is fundamental to our body language, and research indicates that voters see beards as, surprise, surprise, more masculine. That can be positive to some, reading as strength and competence. But to others, especially women, it can be negative, conveying aggression and opposition to feminist ideals. So this is hilariously ridiculous. So Tim Walz's eye popping is a strength, and JD Vance's beard is a weakness because women are not going to like it because it's a betrayal of, quote, feminist ideals to have a beard. This is the state of our media right now. Meanwhile, the actual voters were concluding that JD Vance won the debate, including at the Washington Post, the focus group that they spoke to there overwhelmingly concluded that JD Vance won the debate. A small minority of their respondents said that Tim Walz won. This was an interesting debate for a bunch of reasons. One of them is that it was honestly one of the single best debate performances by any American politician ever in what JD Vance did last night. I'm talking anybody. He's right there near the tippy top of the list because he's competent. He's cool as a cucumber. He navigates deftly through both the questions and his opponent's answers. He was in a 3v1 situation yet again, as you had two CBS correspondents who dedicated practically the entirety of the debate to Kamala Harris-style talking points to try and take him down. And he was very comfortable in that position. He ran circles around all three of them on that stage. There was no audience, which worked out well, I think. And JD Vance just looked like a guy who's had a lot of practice doing this, although his political career has been a lot shorter than Tim Walz's. Tim Walz has spent many years in politics. JD Vance just a few, and Vance just looks so much better. Walz, all of the pre-debate sort of expectation setting, oh, he's all nerves. He's so nervous. Well, I got to tell you, he did actually look kind of nervous, at least out the gate. He looked rattled by the experience. Those eyes popping out of his head betrayed the fact that he was unprepared in so many ways to handle JD Vance. One reason he may have been unprepared is that JD just came across as a really nice dude. He got up on that stage. He was congenial. He was ceding all sorts of points. He was saying, oh, I think, Tim Walz probably means it, but he kept circling back to where he should have been, which is constantly saying that Kamala Harris has failed us. Kamala Harris has been vice president for the last 3.5 years, and it's been a disaster. In fact, the first question yesterday revolved around Iran's attack on Israel, all those missiles flying in. And the moderators wanted to know, what the two men thought of it. Walz was caught flat-footed. He didn't even really give an answer to the question. Here's how it went with JD Vance.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump, who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about...
Let me just point something out here. This is like the first 2-3 minutes of the debate. How long do people watch these things? Now, if you're in my situation, you watch the whole thing. You watch the whole thing. But you're asking a lot of people to stick with 90 minutes to a debate, more than 90 minutes. It's a vice presidential debate. By and large, the only people who are really going to stick it out for the whole thing are partisans, people who kind of enjoy the combat of politics and are very interested in the outcome of the election to the point that they're talking about it on a daily basis. But if you're just really trying to convince people who are glancingly staring at the election, who may want to check in on this, who are kind of checking into it, the moment that you grab them is those first few minutes of the debate. After that, whatever happens beyond that, it's really going to be the most hardcore people who stick in all the way to the very end, right? That's a safe conclusion. And so J.D. Vance used his first minute very successfully in, we didn't even play it here, but he first introduced himself to the audience. He basically said, like, hey, you might not know who I am. And he talked about his upbringing and what his mother was like and what kind of world he came from and how he's just a normal guy who came up with a family that had all sorts of struggles, and now he's grateful to be an American and be in this position. It was a great presentation. And then he says what he kept revolving back to the whole night. He said, all these great ideas you keep pitching us, why didn't you do them? Why didn't you do them? Kamala Harris had 3.5 years, and she didn't do them.
The sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. Yeah. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but But effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Yeah, a very effective use of his time. There's some interesting things going on. You know, the left, this is the expectations game. And everyone, you need to remember this from now on in any debate that we might see forever. But the expectations game does matter a great deal. The way you expect these guys to perform before the debate begins affects your judgment about how they do during the debate. And it's not just for you on a personal level, on a societal level. It's why there's so much media gamesmanship leading up to a debate where you have, it's the only time you ever hear Democrats say things like, oh, Donald Trump is a really talented debater. Donald Trump has done this a lot. Donald Trump has a lot of practice at this. Kamala Harris is going against a guy with a lot of practice at debates. The reason for that is because they want to set expectations unreasonably high so that Trump fails to meet that bar, and then they can say Kamala Harris defeated him. And the inverse, of course, is true, too. You want to be careful not to downplay expectations for your opponent so much in the media that if they outperform the very low bar you set for them, it looks like they were a massive success. Lots of Republicans, lots of conservatives probably made that mistake. I know I did to some extent with Kamala Harris when she walked into that debate with Trump because I was measuring Kamala at her absolute dumbest. I was thinking about her as the Venn diagram lady, the lady who talks about how school buses work, about staring at the moon and seeing it with your own eyes, the idiocy that routinely comes out of her mouth when she attempts to speak off the cuff. And so you go in there with these low expectations, and then, well, they drilled into her for a week all these talking points that she was able to deliver, and it makes it look like she's more impressive. So yesterday, there was a similar phenomenon happening with JD Vance, which worked out to his benefit. So what has the left been saying to its audiences? You perhaps know some of this because we always talk about what the left is up to. But MSNBC and CNN, they've been telling their audiences the Tim Walz talking point. JD Vance is a weirdo. JD Vance is a freak. JD Vance wants to track women's pregnancies. JD Vance hates women. JD Vance, JD Vance, JD Vance. They had created this caricature of him that bore no resemblance to the guy who actually stood on that stage last night. None whatsoever. In fact, they had spent so much time casting him as the boogeyman, he came out as a perfect gentleman last night, including to his opponent. And I'll have more time to play clips with you throughout the show, but I want to just emphasize one other element here. I was watching this debate last night, and there were moments, perhaps you felt the same way, where I was hoping J.D. Vance would go for the jugular in a Trumpian style. Now's your chance. Go after him. Tampon Tim, leaving babies on the table to die, on and on and on. The way he was shooting his own citizens with paintball guns. Tim Walz, Tim Walz, Tim Walz. And certainly there was a temptation there, at least for me, for that to happen. You want that to happen. But then you've got to shake yourself awake because you have to remember what this is about. It's not about convincing Vince. It's not about convincing the guy who's already on Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's side. It's not. It's about sending a message to Americans who haven't picked yet, who haven't made up their mind yet, who have had a range of lies told to them about who Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are. And so J.D. Vance's message last night was to them. Did he bring up a lot of the things I just mentioned? Yes, in his own way. In his own way. Not as a slugfest, but in a gentle but insistent way. He was good. He was really good. And this is last night's performance absolutely ratified Donald Trump's judgment to make him the running mate. J.D. Vance is really talented at this, and he's thought really deeply about it. And he's very well equipped to handle his opponents. So I thought it was a great night for him. Will it move things immensely? I don't know. We're getting some early numbers now on the vice presidential debate. It turns out they were pretty big. We're talking tens of millions of people were watching last night. A lot of people were watching. Will it change the race a whole bunch? Maybe. Probably not. The left is jumping all over the conclusion of the debate because Tim Walz tried to make it about January 6th, and JD Vance basically hand-waved it away. He's like, I'm not talking about the past. I'm talking about the future. I want to take care of Americans. And the left thinks this is a big own. Oh, look at him. He's running away from the January 6th question. I'm telling you right now, if you think, I shouldn't give Kamala Harris's campaign any advice. Go ahead, waste money on this. They're already making ads and wasting cash on it. If you think January 6th is a subject that Americans don't already have an opinion on, you're an idiot. This is a tremendous waste of time and resources. What you're watching, actually, the only conclusion you can walk away from this with is they're coping. It's a coping mechanism for an otherwise unimpressive debate by Tim Walz, by bug-eyed Tim Walz, who really didn't succeed in doing anything other than having the single line of the night. What's the most memorable line of the entire night? Of the entire night. The most memorable line was this.
I've become friends with school shooters.
That's it. That's the only one. So we go from they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people who live there, to Tim Walz last night.
I've become friends with school shooters.
That's it. That's it. And by the way, the Washington Post has a roundup today of all of the most memorable lines. The most memorable lines. Guess what line isn't in their piece?
I've become friends with school shooters.
The Tim Walz being friends with school shooter thing is not going away. Last night, Walz went out with his wacky wife to get pizza afterwards, and reporters were shouting, "Why'd you say you're friends with school shooters?"
So what do you think your strongest moment was tonight?
Oh, just, I think it was a good debate. The public got to see a contrast. And I think the ending sums it up. The democracy issue is important.
Governor, you said you become friends with school shooters during the debate. Can you clarify what you meant on that?
Can you clarify what you meant when you said you'd be friends with school shooters?
Multiple reporters wondering, what the hell are you talking about? Today, he was just on a tarmac. He was asked yet again to clarify.
Do you want to clarify the comments that you made about school shooters?
Yeah, and look, you got to see me. These folks know me. I'm super passionate about this. The question come up about school shooting. We're talking about everything except school shootings. And I sat as a member of Congress with the Sandy Hook parents, and it was a profound movement. David Hogg is a good friend of mine. You have seen me do this. I was talking about being people where there are school shooters. And
Being people where there are school shooters. Yeah, that makes sense. That clears it up. Thanks. It's perfect. Coming up, Marc Lotter will be with us from the America First Policy Institute, former Trump-Pence campaign member. We've got a lot to talk about. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Luke Rosiak joins us from the Daily Wire at 4:30. And then Sean Carney will be with us, President, CEO of 40 Days for Life. That's at 5 o'clock. We'll talk about the issue of life coming up on that debate stage last night. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Let's see. Some of your calls are coming in on the debate. I want to get to those. Jeff is in Hagerstown on line 1. Hello, Jeff. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, Vince. How you doing?
Good, sir.
Good. Hey, rapid fire real quick. I couldn't watch the debate last night, but I knew Walz stood no chance. And if staring and eyes bugging out or something of intelligence, well, that all went to crap when he opened his mouth up. And if you look up the words oaf and lummox, they're one and the same, but they're both describing Tim Walz. And what is this guy anyway, man? He is such a clown. Remember how he used to come out on stage with Kamala, twisting and turning and bumping and grinding? It's like he's some washed-up game show host. And last but not least, you know why Kamala is so dingy anymore?
Why is that?
She keeps running into walls.
That's a good line, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a Jeff with many fine observations on what's going on with Tim Walz, who was kind of a disaster last night. Hoke's calling in from Round Hill on that subject. Line 2. Hello, Hoke. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. So I had somebody this morning describe Walz in a way that I hadn't thought of, but it is perfect. And then I've got one more point. He said he was Tim Kaine, only dumber.
Tim Kaine, only dumber. Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but my other line is, when I saw him on the stage last night with his bulging eyes and all that crap, I swear he reminded me of Charles Manson.
Yeah, so that's so he had serial killer eyes to you. That was the was the look.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, you think about the pictures you used to see of Charles Manson with those big bulging eyes.
Yeah.
Every time he was, I saw Charles Manson in Tim Walz.
Yeah, that's a wild observation. Yeah, no, he did. He looked weird. He looked, he's ascribing the adjective weird to all sorts of other people. Walz looked completely out of place. He looked lost. The guy had his eyes bugging out of his head, and Politico tells us it's a great thing. Thank you, Hoke. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's an interesting observation. Jeff is in Michigan, line 3. Jeff, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, I think the big soundbite should be when he said that when he went to Tiananmen Square, he learned a lot about governance. He went in the aftermath, and the only lesson in the aftermath is to kill or imprison protesters that you don't agree with.
Yeah, he said that was a big lesson for him.
January 6th.
Yeah, that was a huge lesson for him. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Now, on this front, he was asked about China, and he gave some bizarro, rambling answer about riding bicycles at night. Take a listen to this.
You said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on.
Okay, what? You grew up in a town where you ride your bike until the streetlights come on? What the hell does that have to do with you lying about going to China, to going to Hong Kong? One of the CBS ladies pressed him on this. Take a listen.
Those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, okay. So whatever any of that means. How is it possible that everyone who communicates among these Democrats just keeps getting worse and worse? You know what I mean? Like Joe Biden's terrible at it. Karine Jean-Pierre is terrible at it. Kamala Harris is terrible at it. And they said, who else should we bring in? Let's bring in Tim Walz. He said he learned a tremendous amount about governance after the Tiananmen Square massacre, which he lied about being present for. Here to cover more of that disaster, Marc Lotter joins us now. He's a chief communications officer at the America First Policy Institute and a former director of strategic communications for the Trump-Pence campaign back in 2020. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Vince, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Have you ever seen a debate like that one?
No, I mean, it was Midwest nice, that I get, but there was like zero substance there, and I've really never seen a major candidate be so unprepared as Tim Walz.
Yeah, how does that even happen? And then meanwhile, JD Vance, for his part, was running circles not only around Walz, but around those moderators. What did you think of JD's performance?
I thought it was very strong. He was very good. I think he was prepared, and I think that's where doing those hard interviews, doing the Sunday shows, doing the not friendly networks prepares you. It builds a muscle memory up, but it also helps when you can run on your record or your partner's record, and you've got policy that you can actually run on rather than running from the media and running from saying anything of substance, which made it equally difficult for Tim Walz.
Mark, who was the audience last night for JD Vance's performance? Because clearly, I think Senator Vance came in with a goal. He was trying to convince some segment of the audience that they needed to support Trump and Pence. And it wasn't me, and I don't think it was you, Mark. I think we know where we're going this election. What did you think of the mission that JD Vance was on last night?
I think if you're one of that maybe 3% who are still undecided, And you know things were cheaper under Donald Trump. You know the border was more secure, the world was safer, but you just can't get over the hump. And you maybe just don't like the way he tweets, the way he said some things. I think what he did was he gave you permission, going, I was the same guy. I used to say those things too, but I came across, and you can do it. And when you compare what he said, kind of giving you permission to, yeah, I know I used to feel that way, but I just can't afford not to vote for him, compared to Tim Walz's continued inability to do the same thing that Kamala can't do. How are you going to lower prices? How are you going to seal the border? Why haven't you done it already? That was the problem, and I think people who wanted those answers didn't get them.
Yeah, JD Vance's practice at dealing with all of these issues was evident in one of the big questions that we kind of knew was coming, which is, hey, you once said all sorts of mean and judgmental things about Donald Trump. What made you change your mind? And listen, I'm going to play here. This is JD Vance's, I think, brilliant answer to that.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews, is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern.
Yeah, what a great answer. So it starts with him saying, hey, some of the reasons I didn't like Trump was because I was misled by the lying media. And then he moves on and says, and whatever failures existed during the Trump administration, well, Congress needs to own them because they really got in his way. Kind of an amazing answer in a very short time frame.
It really was, and and actually could also be some sort of an answer for the for the Harris-Biden administration. Except their policies are so bad, they're just trying to ignore them rather than explain them away. But I do think again, you're talking about that 3% or so that's undecided.
Yeah,
that's very compelling out there. The other 97%, we've made up our minds. Most people aren't going to change back from one or the other. But for that last 3%. In an election that was decided by 43,000 votes in 3 states, maybe that's the encouragement that you needed to go do your own research, or to go, yeah, you know what? He said it's okay. I'll go this way.
Yeah. Marc Lotter, when you watched the JD Vance performance last night, and you and I, both men, maybe it's hard to assess, but perhaps you knowing all of this can. Right now we know that the Trump campaign is doing very well among men, especially young men. There's a lot of great numbers there for the Trump campaign. But they're much softer with women and not performing quite as well, according to every available survey. Do you think that JD Vance's performance last night may have had an impact among some of those female voters?
Well, I do. I mean, look, I think it depends because, if you're one of those, and granted, they are on both sides of this issue. If you are a single issue voter, whether that be on abortion, whether that be on something else, then probably no debate is going to change your mind on that.
Right.
But if you are undecided, or if you're one of those who, I voted for Biden in 2020 because I didn't like the way Trump tweeted, but now I can't afford groceries and gas, and my kids don't feel safe because we've got 13,000 murderers and 15,000 sex offenders running around as illegal immigrants. Now all of a sudden I'm looking for a reason to go back. And so seeing the youth, the vitality, maybe the ability to put forth the American First agenda without all of the style points of Donald Trump, maybe that connected with you in a different way. They're saying the same thing, but using their own language, using their own tone.
Yes.
And maybe that softer Midwest nice is what you wanted to hear.
Mark, finally, just being a guy who deals with political communications, was it a mistake for the left to frame JD Vance as some sort of weirdo or whack job ahead of this debate? Because he shows up and he's not the caricature that they had built.
Well, I do. I mean, there's so many things, but look, I also don't fault them from a political operative standpoint. They've got nothing else to run on. They can't run on their record. They can't run on their plans. They can't run on let's keep the good times going.
Right.
So all they can run is against. So it's against Donald Trump, against the imaginary Project 2025, against fear-mongering, and against this weirdo named JD Vance. They got nothing else.
Yeah, nothing else. And it's all being exposed. Thank you very much, Marc Lotter. Really appreciate your time today from the America First Policy Institute.
Good to talk to you, man.
Good to talk to you. Okay, that's Marc Lotter. More of your calls are coming in, 888-630-9625. I've got Bobby calling in from Round Hill now, line 2. Hello, Bobby. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, thanks, Vince. I just want to point out, hard to believe JD won the primary and the election just 2 years ago in Ohio. He's been in the Senate for less than 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
What a difficult road that was, the resistance from the Ohio GOP establishment against him.
Right.
And I hope what happened last night, what they heard from him saying, is that maybe the GOP establishment will start getting more on board with the J.D. Vance and the Donald Trump ticket. It seems like they're still holding back, but I'd like to be proven wrong.
Yeah, and of course, there's also Mitch McConnell and the efforts to really kind of and they're finding they're on opposite sides of all of this Ukraine funding going on. There's very much J.D. Vance really upsets the establishment in a lot of ways, and in fact, just the fact that Donald Trump made him the running mate was very contested by the establishment GOP, who were desperate for President Trump to pick somebody else. He went against all of that. He went with his own gut here. I know people like Tucker Carlson and Donald Trump Jr. were very much J.D. Vance fans, wanted to see him get the nod, and sure enough, President Trump went that way. And now it's looking like a very inspired choice, Bobby.
Yeah, and I would say J.D. last night put a big, big marker down on 2028.
I think you're totally right. I think you're totally right about that. Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate the call and the analysis. All right, hold on. More of your calls, more audio coming up. We still have to get to Doug Emhoff and the reports that he apparently has been slapping women around. Mark is calling in Virginia Beach, line 4. Hello, Mark. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Today.
Hey, Mark.
So I have a friend that listened to the debate last night. She is a Democrat, and the gentleman that was on with you a few minutes ago, she quoted him verbatim, or he quoted her saying that because he's young and because he came across polite and articulate, she's not going to vote for Kamala Harris. She's going to vote for Donald Trump. And she's a Democrat. He persuaded her in just one debate that that's who she wants to see.
Is she a Virginia voter, Mark?
No, she's a New York voter.
Oh, okay. I was hoping Virginia. That'd be good. But I'll take them where we can get them. Well, that's
absolutely.
Well, that's something. So she's a Democrat woman. She watched the debate, and she concluded that she likes what's coming out of J.D. Vance's mouth. She likes how he presented, and she said, I'm with them this election.
And she's African-American to top it all off.
How about it?
So,
Yeah.
New York Democrat, African-American, listened to what J.D. Vance had to say, how he articulated himself, his point, and she said the Walz, she couldn't see him anywhere near the White House.
All right. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. So a little anecdotal evidence of some movement in the electorate. Steve's calling in from Dale City, Virginia, line 2. Hello, Steve. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, Steve. Oh, good old Steve. Steve's in Dale City. Steve's waiting to join us on the air. Steve, this is your big chance. No, Steve. Steve says that JD Vance was cool, calm, and collected. And he said Tim Walz was red-faced the entire time. Was that coming across to you, too? I wasn't sure if that was just my television. I thought maybe the saturation was tuned up way too much. I was watching, and I was like, does his face look unusually red? It looks really, really messed up. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was my TV. Let's see. Calling in from Alexandria, Donna now, line 3. Hello, Donna. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hello, Vince. How are you?
I'm good, Donna. What's on your mind?
Well, I was calling to just, I heard your prior caller, and I wanted to also mention that I am a Virginia resident. I'm African-American, and I voted Democratic all my life. My family just bleeds blue, but I was so impressed with JD, so I'm on the JD Trump team, and I went and voted this morning, and I pulled all the Republican levers.
Donna, did you just make that decision after seeing the debate last night, or were you already leaning towards Trump and Mr. Vance?
Well, I was sort of leaning toward it, but I couldn't really say it, you know?
Yeah.
But I just didn't like some of the things that I was hearing from the Democratic Party this year. And it's, I think you're right, or Dan Bonadino was correct in saying that they're losing a lot of African-American voters.
It's definitely happening in the polls. Donna, thank you. Fascinating. So JD Vance did make a difference, apparently. Donna's saying, yeah, I cast my ballot this morning. She went from not telling anyone to telling everyone right here on WMAL. Stay with us.